Okay, good, excuse me. Good morning, everybody. It's 8 a.m. I'll call the meeting of the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District order on this date of 25 January. Welcome to all of our guests that are watching virtually or will be watching it later. Janelle, would you like to go through the virtual meeting guidance?
Certainly. Good morning, commissioners, members of the public, and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm going to review just a few decorum rules for all to please follow. Number 1, please ensure your mic is muted unless you are speaking. Number 2, please state your name before speaking. Number 3, for those who are presenting today, please have your cameras on if possible. You may turn your cameras off if you're experiencing technological challenges. And number 4, as a reminder, the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host, and this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. With that, thank you, everyone, and welcome.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. Michael, do you have any announcements?
I do not have any announcements this morning.
Okay. Then we'll move on to 1E, which is Dana Reed is going to introduce Bryan Thiel, the Comptroller.
Good morning, Commission. I'm pleased to welcome Bryan Thiel to the district. Bryan is our new Comptroller and leads the accounting team. He has a wealth of accounting education and experience, including being a financial manager, chief accountant, comptroller, and a senior financial analyst. And as well, he has his certified public accounting license through the state and a degree in accounting. He was integral to the ERP implementation at the state of Wisconsin Department of Transportation. And so we are really excited to have him as our finance lead on our ERP project that we're just starting at the district. In his free time, he lives in Waunakee with his wife, Sammy, who's a nurse. And they're really busy because they have 2 little boys and 2 border collies that keep them busy. And they enjoy spending time up at Bryan's parents' lake house in Shawano, as well as going to Packer games, and he enjoys golfing. So please join me in welcoming Bryan Thiel to the district.
Welcome, Bryan, as the district's comptroller. Hope you have a good tenure with the district. Okay, that will move us to item 2, which is appearances by the public. Does anybody that's present want to speak on anything? Anybody that's present want to speak? I don't see anybody, so we will move on. Okay, we'll move to the consent calendar. One thing I'm going to ask is that we move item 3D from the consent calendar to topics, since that will be requiring a roll call vote. So do we have a motion to move items 3A through 3C and 3E through 3I? And if anybody has any questions, now would be the time to ask on any of those items.
It's Wilson. I'll move approval of those items on the consent calendar.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Wilson to move approval of the consent calendar except for item 3D. Do we have a second?
Hi, Tom. Commissioner Clark, I'll second that.
Did I hear?
Clark.
Okay, I didn't hear that. Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by Commissioner Clark, to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? None, motion carries. Okay, that will take us to item 4, but we'll first cover item 3D, which is the review and adoption of a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of just over 7.4 million in general obligation sewage system promissory notes. That's mainly for Pump Station 4 and the 2021 treatment plant HVAC improvement project. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay, I don't see any hands up or hear anything. Do we have a motion to approve that the resolution adopting the sale of the promissory notes?
I'd make a motion to approve, Tom, Commissioner Clark.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Clark. Do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Freeze. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Clark and second by Commissioner Freeze to adopt the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of $7,403,139 in a general obligation sewage system promissory notes. Any discussion or comments? Okay, seeing that nobody's there to speak on it or desires to have any questions or comments, although Janelle, do you like to do the roll call vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Bookland. Commissioner Bookland? I believe you're on mute.
Janelle, remember she's on her iPhone.
Okay, I will unmute you, Commissioner Bookland.
Thank you, Janelle. I'm having some technical issues, but aye.
There we go. Commissioner
Aye.
Clark. Thank you. We have you, Commissioner Bookland.
Aye.
Commissioner Eskridge. Not sure if she is on. Okay. Commissioner Freeze.
Aye.
Commissioner Havel. Commissioner Havel.
Commissioner Hubble seems to have frozen.
Okay, we'll come back to him. Commissioner Meyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Murphy.
Aye.
Commissioner Rummel.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
And Commissioner Havel.
Aye.
There we go. We got it.
Oops. Thank you, Janelle. Motion carries. And my screen seems like it froze up for a second there. Okay, that will take us to item 4A, the Community Value Survey. Amanda, you're going to lead this off?
I will. Adam, if you want to start pulling up the screen and as I introduce this or your presentation, that would be great. So good morning, Commissioners. Amanda Wigner, Communications and Public Affairs Director here at the district. So I am pleased to share with you all this morning, and I'll turn it over to the team from HDR here in a moment, but to share the results, share some of the results from our 2023 Community Values Survey. So we did our first Community Values Survey in 2019, and reprised and conducted another survey in 2023 with the goal moving forward to do this on a regular basis of about every 3 years or so. As you'll see, and as you may have already noted from looking at the packet, a couple of kind of key points that I want to pull forward before turning it over to the team is overall, the district is respected and awareness of what we do is growing. But there are clear opportunities to better tell our story, highlight our programs, and especially highlight the critical importance of our infrastructure and the workers that support that. And we certainly do that by continuing to support and grow the communications and marketing function here at the district. So I'm going to turn it over to the team at HDR. We have with us today Tess Heller, Adam Yellis, and Jerry Britton, and I'm going to turn it over to them, and they're going to give you some the lowdown on the survey. So take it away, HDR.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Amanda. So excited to be here with you all this morning and present these really fantastic results. So I'm Tess Heller. I'm with HDR, and I lead our strategic communications team here in Wisconsin. So I just did a brief introduction, but I'm going to actually pass it over to Adam and Jerry. They're going to lead the majority of today's presentation. So Adam, over to you.
All right, thank you. My name's Adam Yields. I'm a senior social scientist at HDR. And as Tess and Amanda mentioned, I'm joined by my colleague Jerry Britton, the Director of Social and Behavioral Sciences at HDR, on this presentation. And I'm going to quickly describe this the survey effort and then walk through some of the findings from the survey in a few key areas. And then Jerry will conclude the presentation with a recap of the findings and a short discussion of the implications of those findings. So let me jump right into this, that our 2023 Community Values Survey had several overlapping goals: to gauge community awareness of the organization, its work, and its programs, to measure public trust of the district, to assess general attitudes of residents towards the district services, programs, pollution prevention efforts, and other desired behaviors, and then also to really understand the communities, the residents' priorities and areas of concern with respect to water quality and wastewater treatment. So to achieve those goals, what we did was we surveyed 500 community members, adults over 18, by telephone interview in October, November, and December of 2023. And each of those participants was given a questionnaire, read a questionnaire, those roughly 12 minutes in length, and included a variety of questions. Some multiple choice questions, some open-ended questions, and then 2 contingent valuation questions that we use to really understand the community's or residents' priorities with respect to wastewater management. Now, the survey was representative of the service area in general, and there were some small survey weights that were applied to align that sample with census demographic statistics. And as I mentioned, there were we surveyed individuals across the service area in the 22 zip code tabulation areas that intersect with the district's service area boundary. And as you'll note, a portion, 67% of that sample, is on public sewer. Another 18% reported that they have a septic or a holding tank, and then 15% of the respondents said they didn't know or they didn't give a response to that question. So we have some variety in terms of the types of residents that are answering this survey, and that allows us to gather sort of a broad picture with respect to community sentiment and perceptions of the district and what the community ultimately values. Okay, so we're going to talk about really 2 big categories of things today: the perceptions of the district and then community values with respect to wastewater management. So I'm going to jump right into the different dimensions or aspects of perceptions of the district that we asked the community. And the first thing we did was ask them a really straightforward question about awareness. Had they heard of the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District before the survey that they were given? So 77% of respondents indicated that they had heard of the district, and 23% said they had not. That is actually fewer respondents saying that they had not heard of the district in comparison to a 2019 survey, though there's some slight differences in how the questions were asked between 2019 and 2023. So it's not a perfect apples to apples comparison, but we believe that roughly 3/4 of the community has an understanding or can at least recognize the district by name. And we didn't see any differences across demographic subgroups, so age groups or owners versus renters in terms of this awareness. So we think that there's a general, understanding and growth with respect to awareness of the district across all demographic groups. Then, in addition to that basic awareness or whether you've heard of the district, we asked people who had heard of the district what their impression of the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District was. And it turns out that overall 80% of respondents had a favorable impression of the district. A combined 10% had either a somewhat unfavorable or strongly unfavorable view. And that is a little bit different than the proportions found in 2019. But we think in general that these are the views with respect to the district, the impression of the district is fairly stable over time, at least at this point. And there's no indication that this favorability differs among demographic groups, right? So we think as a community as a whole that that there's favorable impressions of the district. Really positive, findings with respect to how the community views the district. That positive view is reinforced by this question where we asked about whether the community saw the district as a credible source of information. I mean, we also asked them about several other groups, whether they were credible sources of information on wastewater management issue. And 93% of the respondents said that the district was a credible source of information on wastewater management. And perhaps, that was what we would expect. But interestingly for us, we see an equal number of individuals who said that they saw the University of Wisconsin scientists as credible sources of information on wastewater management. So for us, what we're seeing here is that the community really sees the district as being comparable to experts or scientists or engineers who have a potentially objective or expert view of wastewater management issues. So that's a really positive finding in our view, and that there were actually slightly less number of respondents who saw local government as being credible on wastewater issues. So really positive findings here, and important to reiterate that that the community at present views the district as a credible kind of expert source on wastewater management issues. Okay, and then we were interested as well in issues of public trust, in how the community thought about the district when it concerns wastewater management. So each of the respondents who had heard of the district were asked some additional questions about whether they felt the district acted in their interests, whether the district was generally capable, whether the district helped educate the community about wastewater issues, and then also whether the district made smart decisions about infrastructure investments. And what we see is that, most residents agree that the district is capable and is acting in their interests, but we see slightly fewer residents affirming that the district makes smart decisions about infrastructure and that they're helping to educate the community about water issues. So this is not saying that the district is not doing these things, but that there's opportunities here for the district to potentially better communicate how it's making decisions and how it's helping to educate the community. Okay, and as I mentioned, we were interested in the public's perception of the district and how it viewed wastewater management, but we're also interested in their general kind of assessment of wastewater management issues. So we asked the community how they valued wastewater management improvements, framed in two different ways. Wastewater management improvements framed as knowledgeable staff in infrastructure modernization, and then also wastewater management improvements framed in terms of sustainability projects. And we used here what is called a contingent valuation approach. So we ask, or we elicit actual values, monetary values from the residents, asking them how much they would be willing to invest or commit to either improving wastewater management through knowledgeable staff in infrastructure modernization, or conversely through sustainability project or continued sustainability projects. So here while on the subsequent slides, you're going to see actual values of what the community says they're willing to pay. The important point here is that we're using this approach in these monetary values to really get at priorities in optimal framing of messages with respect to wastewater management from the community. So while the values allow us to make real world comparisons, they're not an evaluation of the district's current fees or activities or planned fees or activities. It is what the community is willing to invest in these two types of wastewater management improvements. So the way we did that was we asked them two separate questions. The first question we asked whether the community to estimate or agree to invest certain amounts. And we did that by asking them whether the district needs to have knowledgeable staff and a modern infrastructure system to efficiently transport and process wastewater from the community. And if investing a few extra cents or dollars each month would support this type of continued quality wastewater infrastructure and services, how much would you invest? And then we take those responses and we fitted a statistical model to those monetary values. And what we find is that at least 50% of respondents are willing to invest $5 a month, or roughly $60 a year, to support continued quality wastewater infrastructure and services framed as knowledgeable staff and modern infrastructure. Now, we do see that there's a willingness to invest that's different across income groups, and that's what we would expect. So higher income respondents typically are willing to invest a little bit more than lower income respondents. And then we also, this overlaps with ownership or whether you rent the home that you live in. And we see that owners are actually willing to invest quite a bit more than renters in this similar idea of modernization and knowledgeable staff. Okay, so at least 50% of respondents are willing to invest roughly $5 a month. Now, we asked in the same sort of way about sustainability projects. So the district's sustainability work includes recycling biosolids from wastewater into agricultural fertilizer, using the treatment plant's own production of renewable natural gas to power its operations, and identifying infrastructure projects to provide many community benefits. What would having the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District continue to invest in sustainability projects be worth to you on a yearly basis? And again, we asked all of the respondents this question, and it turns out that roughly 50% of them are willing to invest $78 per year, or roughly $6.50 a month, to further invest, to incrementally invest in sustainability projects. Now, interestingly, this willingness to invest in sustainability projects was not correlated with general attitudes towards government, knowledge of wastewater management, or even perceptions of the district. So there's definitely, we can say that within the community, there's a strong sentiment towards sustainability projects or wastewater management framed as in sustainability terms, right? So slightly more residents are willing to invest more amounts of money in sustainability versus knowledgeable staff in modernization. Now, those are obviously not different, not strictly different things, but this is, again, a question about how you frame these projects or these investments. Okay, and then again, we see that that there is differences between homeowners and renters in terms of how much they're willing to invest annually, as well as some differences in terms of individuals who are on public sewer versus those who have septic or holding tanks, right? So higher amounts of willingness to invest in sustainability projects among homeowners and those on public sewer versus other demographic categories. Okay, so I've kind of touched on really two big key areas: perceptions of the district and what the communities value or prioritize in terms of these two big categories. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jerry to kind of recap these findings and discuss some of our recommendations coming out of this survey.
Thanks so much, Adam. So Adam explained everything really quite well, but I will just try to reiterate a few points here and summarize a bit. So overall, the district is doing really well in terms of community favorability, viewed as capable, viewed as having expertise that is equivalent with scientists. And this is about, when we look across kind of similar surveys of local government, it's pretty much in line with this type of thing more broadly. And we do see, though, however, that there are some opportunities for the district to take a bit more active role in really communicating what they're doing in terms of education and in terms of how decisions are made. In terms of water impacts and who's responsible or what is responsible for impacts to water quality, residents continue, as was the case in 2019, to view businesses, large and small, manufacturing, agriculture, and so forth, as having the greatest impact. But there was a little bit more, an increase this time in the number of households that see themselves as playing a role as well. Next slide, Adam. And despite that, overall residents said they should not have to pay more than they already do for improved water quality, as Adam explained, they did show a willingness to invest. And when we spoke to the staff and the executive team, it turns out, the dollar amounts are about what the typical rate raises are in any case. So it showed that those are pretty much in line. But as Adam explained, what really was the purpose here of doing this contingent valuation is to frame improvements in a couple of different ways to test how people perceive that framing and what they perceive to be more valuable. So I think this framing around sustainability and really promoting sustainability through management of water resources was very effective and something that the district can consider using. And again, the differences across groups in terms of both income and home ownership are pretty much to be expected. Next slide, Adam. So what we recommend in terms of going forward here, overall, as I said, these findings were positive. They point out a few areas maybe for some further activities and further focus. We recommend doing this sort of survey because things change, communities change, people's attitudes do change over time, as well as the district will be continuing education programs and so forth that ultimately will have an impact. So this type of surveying we recommend to do every 2 to 3 years. 3 years is probably sufficient unless there's a big change that happened or a really big program that needs feedback sooner. So important to do that. We also think that there was a component of this survey that we're not talking about today, but that is in the report that's more about behaviors in terms of disposing of fats, oils, and greases, and so forth. So as the district develops specific programmatic and educational efforts to address those issues, we do recommend doing potentially separate program evaluations. Those can be much smaller, more flexible, done on an as-needed basis to assess the impacts of individual programs. And then in the future as well, we would recommend really clearly defining organizations that would make a good, that are similar to the district. The organization is unique in many ways, but really looking to see across other communities, are there organizations that are really doing similar work that would be worthwhile to compare these measures to, just to help determine what is an acceptable range. And I think I talked about the shorter topically focused surveys for programs. So in terms of community value, I think the potential to focus on specific projects, proposed programs, et cetera, will be important in terms of determining what can be charged, and to use this contingent valuation method to go about getting feedback on potential pricing. And then finally, just briefly, the opportunities, continue educating, but maybe make that more public, talk more about it, communicate more about it. A sustainable wastewater infrastructure communication and education campaign may be worthwhile to bring some of those numbers along. Designing community educational events, including at the Nine Springs wastewater treatment plant. We did find, we didn't report that here this morning, but it's in the report, there is fairly low visitation rate of that facility. So I think there's an opportunity there. And then given these willingness to pay or these contingent valuation findings, communicate about sustainability goals in conjunction with needed price increases over time. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jerry and Adam. So with that, we'll turn it back to the commissioners to see if they have any questions. And one thing I will just note before turning it over for questions is that the community value survey is also part of an internal effort here with myself and my colleague Amy Steger, and we are updating our brand strategy and have a number of different activities that we are completing that are actually wrapping up right now, including this community value survey. And we will be developing a new communications and marketing plan using all of this data and some additional pieces for the district. So just a bit of context for that too, especially as we talked about recommendations and opportunities. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, President Hovell, to see if there are questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Amanda and HDR, for your work and presentation on this. Marcia, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Good morning, everyone. You have the first words I've said out loud. I thank you for the presentation. Obviously, the one in our packet had more detail, and the detail is what really caught my attention. When it talked about how people, their awareness about putting fats and grease, et cetera, into the system. And I have to admit, as somebody who's probably generally more aware, it wasn't until I knew about all that, but when I visited the plant and I saw those bubbles of hideous looking fat on the surface, I was like, oh, because people like me put fat down there. And I really think that's an area to focus on, as the recommendation was on programs, as well as, and we discussed this once previously, kind of encouraging people to add that device to their salt softener, and just elevating the conversation about salt and fat, like after those famous books in the foodie world, it comes to our world too at the end. So thank you again, and this is really interesting. And congratulations to the district for the good, good knowledge base. And finally, just one thing that people are familiar, I assume you spelled out the name, because I would think many local residents of Madison, when they see MMSD, they think about the school district. So presumably you called that out for people, so they were like, oh yeah, right, same initials. But I'm assuming that, but it's just something that strikes me. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Rommel, I thank you for that. Yes, we did focus on today's presentation. There's a lot more in the findings report, commissioners, if you haven't looked at that. And we did focus on perceptions and community values, just from a framing of, this is what community perception is, and commissioners having a piece of that pie. But specifically for pollution prevention, yes, there were some really great questions in there, and our pollution prevention staff are doing some great work on that too. So in addition to this community value survey, in terms of fats, oils, and greases, or what we call FOGs for short, Catherine Harris and the pollution prevention team recently completed a separate study, ethnographic study. I believe I said that, framed that correctly, ethnographic study to understand why people make the choices they do when it comes to fats, oils, and greases. So some really interesting information coming out of there, and really just kind of putting all of these pieces together in terms of program development, and the same with blending valves. That has been something new and exciting to work with the pollution prevention team on over the last year, and really just starting to coalesce around that and building partnerships and stakeholders on that program. And to your point too about saying out the full name, yes, it is MMSD, and having that same acronym as the school district, it does make things challenging. I was just at a meeting yesterday where I overheard a person say she got questioned why she was going to a school district meeting, and had to specifically say, no, the sewer district. So this is why I try to push staff to just say sewer district instead of MMSD. So thank you. I appreciate your comments.
I start calling it Mad Sewer because, I think that's kind of cute.
That works too.
And
Tom,
just
you
to
have your hand up?
clarify, in the survey, it was completely spelled out.
I figured it was. Thank you.
Tom, you have your hand up?
Of course. So, just a couple of things. This looked like it was a great survey, and and thank you for the information. And man, it's good to hear that you're going to work in these suggestions. The only on the unfavorable opinion, or or people that weren't quite so hot on MMSD when they heard it, or Mad Sewer, was there any question for a reason? Or I guess I'm just curious about the timing of this with the Badger Mill Creek timing, and if that had any effect on what some people might have saw that were concerned about that decision. So that was kind of my thought. Still, our unfavorable percentage is pretty low, certainly, but you always want to. I'm one of those people that likes when people like me, not when they don't. So, any reasons in particular?
Adam, I'll let you start, and then I can jump in.
So we did not ask a follow-up question, so we don't know why people are unfavorable. But I would just say that this is a really low number of people. And generally, when you ask these sort of kind of favorable, unfavorable questions about whether it's local government or federal government or other sorts of, public administrative entity, these are rough. You always get a small number of people that are just kind of that are naturally unfavorable in this regard. So I really don't think that number is anything to worry about. But yes, potentially for the future, maybe there's a follow up and find out really what's driving that opinion.
Yeah, and I would just say on timing, Commissioner Wilson, we were doing this or the calls in October, November, December, and it was the entire service area. So I would be hard pressed to think that Badger Mill Creek had much of anything to do with the favorability. I mean, haters will hate, but as Adam pointed out, it's a fairly low number, and we still like you too. So that's all good.
That's good to hear.
Okay, Brad?
Yeah, I was interested in actually had the same thought Tom did when I saw the number of unfavorable opinions about the district. And I was interested in finding out if the number of respondents or those surveyed was it equal across all of the zip codes that were surveyed? And I was also curious about the number of those surveyed that were located outside of the district. And I know that you could probably stratify the results by zip code and by those in and out of the district, and the results would not be statistically significant because of the low number of respondents involved. Nonetheless, I was interested in that, and if not for my own purposes, maybe sharing that information with district staff might be interesting. So, any comments on that?
Adam, why don't you take that one?
Yes, thank you. So, so the survey was not designed to make comparisons across zip codes, right? It was designed to look at a representative sample of across a fairly small set of demographics across the service area as a whole. So yes, there are some people that are in zip codes, but technically outside of the service area. But I don't think we asked them, and perhaps we could devise a way to back out those individuals and look at those differences. But I think as a whole, I think that there was the majority of people, a large number of people across all of the zip codes that were sampled tended to have a favorable view of the district, and I think and I would expect to see that, given the kind of the distribution of responses, I would expect to see a similar sort of thing, regardless of how we kind of slice up the data as you suggested. So.
Yes, and to your point, to actually do a statistical comparison by zip code, we would have had to recruit a much, much larger sample. So that is a limitation, but the goal was really to have a representative sample of the whole district. But certainly that data, is in the file and can be parsed, but it's not going to give you a read that we could say there are differences with confidence. And Adam has looked across zip codes, and we would say we're not seeing much difference.
Thank you.
Okay, Greg?
Morning. This is very interesting. I had one question follow up here on the willingness to pay questions. So depending on how you read the data, anywhere from 18% to 35% are not members of the community, meaning they don't pay into Madison Met. Although I would argue, if you don't know if you have a septic tank, you probably don't, because you would know, I would think, or you have bigger problems potentially. So let's just say this is roughly 20% of the people are not members of this community from a paying perspective. Did you take those out of the response in terms of willingness to pay?
No, we did not, and we actually looked at differences across those groups. And we see that because we actually see that people who are on public sewer, who are paying into the system, were actually willing to pay more than those who are not, which makes sense, to some degree. And about the people who said they don't know, I would say that that there is a group of people or percentage of people that didn't want to or preferred not to answer all demographic questions, of which this was one. So that's capturing some of those people as well that just simply don't want to reveal specific demographic information.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Greg, I had a similar question, so you basically asked it because I was wondering what the difference would be if you took out the 35% of self-reporting that are not self-reported, not in the district, or not, I don't want to say not in the district, but served by sanitary sewer or don't know, if the pay question would change out differently from what I hear you saying. Actually, it might, but it may actually be more, people be willing to pay more. Okay.
I guess I'll just add that it's an interesting distinction of being on sanitary versus septic. Because some of these people, if they're on septic, they may also be working or enjoying things that are on sanitary. And then also individuals with septic, most likely that's when they're emptying their septic tanks, it has to come here. So, it is some really interesting overlaps that we really didn't discover here. But I think these are good points. But definitely just the positive response with the willingness to pay overall was really great to see through this.
Yeah. So I think that anybody else have any additional questions?
I do.
Go ahead, Beth.
I can't put my hand up, but yep. I just was wondering about income and disparity, because did you get any information on income levels and a willingness to invest in the district?
Yes. So people who have higher incomes are willing to invest more in these ideas of sustainability and in modernization, or even a knowledgeable staff. So that, to some extent, that lets us know that that we're capturing this information or this willingness to pay correctly or accurately, because we would expect people with higher income to naturally have the ability and then likely the willingness to invest more.
Yep, and that's great. I just was wondering, what about those who have a lower income level? Could we dig into a little bit more about, how much they'd be willing to invest? And then how we could help, them to see the value? Or I guess I'm kind of digging at, the underserved in our community, their ability to pay and their willingness to pay, and what as a district we could do to help them along.
Yeah, so I would say that those comparisons are in the larger report, so you can see some of those comparisons between the higher income, or at least a qualitative statement about those differences, and you see it in particular with homeowners versus renters, which is a similar kind of set of demographics where there is quite a gap in terms of willingness to pay. So, and I will leave kind of how you resolve that, or how you reach those lower income residents to encourage them to invest, to Amanda and her team. So.
Yeah, and I guess what I would say on that too, Commissioner Bookland, specifically to your question about how might we help them, that wasn't part of the design of the survey. That's not to say that we couldn't pull that out as a separate question in the future. And then also one of the focus items for Michael and the executive office this year is around equity and building a community of practice around that to work with other owner communities and those in the community to kind of think about this problem. It is a little bit more challenging for us as a wholesaler because we work directly with the communities, but that's recognized in that focus item for the district this year. So really, really great point. The survey just wasn't designed to kind of get down to that sort of level of detail.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amanda. Appreciate it.
Okay, anyone else? Ken or Ezra?
Just really appreciate HDR's work, and then for us, this is really interesting, but I'm excited to know that the Communications and Public Affairs Office team is going to pick up and just really run with this in terms of informing the work that they do on community outreach and education and behavior work, all of it. So great stuff. Glad to hear all of it this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer.
Okay, before we get to Marcia, Ken, do you have any comments or anything?
No further questions, Tom. I think the point that Commissioner Rommel made regarding the MMSD and the confusion with the school district is a very good point. And we, as a district, I know Amanda's working on that, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, Commissioner Clark, it's interesting. Our name is largely dictated by statute. That doesn't mean that we don't have some options, but certainly something that I think about more than I probably should.
Okay, Marcia?
Yeah, one thing when I was going through the agenda last night, as I read this whole thing, and then later we're going to talk about Michael's the changes in his job duties, et cetera, how this really relates and will inform that discussion as we go forward about his public face and what it includes, and sort of have some key ideas for some things he can take up as part of our outreach to the public. So it was really good timing. Thank you.
You.
Okay. Anyone else before we move on? I don't see any additional hands up, so thank you very much for the presentation, Amanda, and your team's work with HDR on this. Much appreciated. So that will take us, excuse me, to project update, employee engagement. Mike Lipsky and Amy Deming gonna report on this.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Hovell. Mike Lipsky, HR Director here at the district, and I'll be presenting today with Amy Deming, our Organizational Development Specialist. We came to you back in July with our employee engagement survey results. And at that time, we promised that we would be back after we've had an opportunity to do some action planning to provide the Commission with an update on exactly how we're turning the employee engagement survey into action. So very convenient that BJ is here. Once I saw him on the meeting, we added 5 extra slides so that BJ could also present. No, actually, BJ, I'm just kidding. You don't have to worry. But it is good that you're here so that you can see the follow-up as well. So Amy, if you want to go to the next slide. So just to remind the Commission as to what our process was, we did an employee engagement survey back in June. We got those results and did some analysis and then shared those survey results out with all staff back in the end of July, and also did our Commission presentation at that same time. Then we took some time to reflect on those results and worked out a process for action planning. And so that was the ACT piece. Then we went through the action planning process at the team level, generally in October of this year. And now we have action plans in place. Most teams are in the process of implementing action plans, largely hopeful to have those action plans implemented by the end of April so that we have an opportunity to reflect and report out on some of those results before we move into our next survey in June. So as you can see, this is a circle. The engagement survey is something that we intend to do on a regular basis and go through this process annually. Next slide. So after we took a look at our results, as we had mentioned back in July, there were some questions around trust and leadership at the district. So trust and organizational leadership was an item that the executive team looked at as an area of district-wide focus. Improved trust is an intended outcome of the recent leadership restructuring. The intent of having an executive office, as Michael mentioned last time, is to increase decision-making and prioritization and communication to staff around how those things work here at the district. So, hopefully that will lead to increases in trust, but the executive office is also going to continue to explore opportunities for improving organizational trust. Next slide. So beyond the district-wide focus, we have 19 team action plans. The way this process worked is supervisors and managers, after the general organizational results were presented, were able to get access to their individual team level data. At that time, each work group, and work group is defined as at least 4 or more employees, so that way we can preserve anonymity within the data. The work groups were each paired with an HR partner. So myself, Amy Deming, and Nadine Majewski supported the different teams here at the district. We met with the supervisors just to go through at a high level what they were seeing in the data. And then we planned what we call the state of the team conversation. And so the state of the team conversation was facilitated by HR, and that involved everybody in the work group. And we worked through a process called what, so what, now what? And through that process, we asked the team to really engage with those results, see what stood out to them in the data, and then what resonated with them in terms of what they could do as a team to try and make progress on one item in the survey. So we weren't asking teams to look at the entire survey and say, okay, you had these 12 items, now fix them all, and we're going to be great next year. It's not how the process is designed, but rather we want the teams to focus in on one item and say, okay, how can we make meaningful progress on this one item? So that way, hopefully when we resurvey in June, we could see some progress in the scores. So the entire work groups were focused in on those conversations, and the outcome of those meetings was an action plan. And an action plan was intended to have at least one, if not, 2 or 3 concrete actions that the team would take as a group to try and make progress on that item. So next slide. So, if you remember, this is the Q12. So there's 12 base questions in the survey. And you can see most questions are targeted through the action planning process. There's only 2 questions on here that don't have any action plans associated with them. One of them is mission and purpose. That was the district's highest scoring item overall. So it's not a surprise that, most teams decided not to focus on that item because that item was a high score in that employees already connect to the district's mission and purpose. The progress question didn't have any action plans specifically tied to it, but if you look at question 5, question 6, question 12, those items have action plans and could naturally result in some increase in people talking about progress. So, it may not have been specifically called out in the action planning process, but that's not a surprise either. You may also notice that this adds up to more than 19. That's okay. Items, team action plans did have the opportunity to identify more than one question that they would be working on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amy to talk about some of the specific action plans that were developed and some of the items that teams are going to work on.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So, the teams focused on things that were important to them in the questions they chose, and also most of them had an opportunity to sort of brainstorm as part of their meeting different actions they could take. So just highlighting a few different examples of the action plans that were chosen by teams. For plans related to basic needs, we had some teams that sort of focused on like the setting expectations side, which was question 1, with an example of a team that was focused on work planning as a group. There were other teams that focused on the materials and equipment side of things. We have a team that was looking at doing, taking inventory of tools on trucks and making sure that all the trucks, kind of had the necessary tools and that there were some processes in place to keep things that way. For plans related to growth, again, there was kind of a spread and a lot of different things that teams chose to focus on. We had, more than one team that chose to look at like existing meetings they already had and ways to encourage more knowledge sharing and, kind of see those as growth opportunities for the group, beyond just sort of kind of status updates and knowing what's going on. And then we had actually my work group that is focused on, kind of learning more about the different operations of the district and job shadowing and other work units. And so when you look at kind of like all the different questions that were chosen and all the different plans that are in place, I think it's really reflective of sort of the ways that supervisors and managers and team members are, kind of taking ownership of this engagement question and really thinking about, what's important to them, what do they value at work, what will kind of improve their experience going forward. And I just wanted to kind of do like a spotlight of a specific team. We have a team that kind of got an early start. So we have a little bit of a sense of, actions that are already underway. This is Eric Dundee's group, Operations and Reliability Leadership. So in their team conversation, that kind of ended up gravitating around this idea of sort of defining quality work and, clear expectations and thinking about sort of building alignment as a leadership team on performance expectations kind of at a team level. And so the tasks they identified were to do an alignment meeting in November, and then to do another meeting in the first quarter of this year. So they had their meeting in November, kind of, looking at, prioritization for their group. And then I won't go into all the details because there's kind of a lot here on the slide, but basically as an end result of that first meeting in November, it was, just sort of developing some clarity as a team, getting insight, not just into your own priorities, right, but like your other team's priorities and, just creating that alignment so that as a next step, they can look at performance indicators and, really kind of define what being, a high performing team means for them. And so it's, kind of an exciting start for that group and something that I think has a lot of potential for having a lot of different ripple effects in terms of, how those managers sort of take this to their teams as well. And so it's just kind of an example of a team that's kind of dove in and is working on that clarity as part of their action planning process. Kind of another piece that's in your report that we're not diving into in the presentation because it was a lot of pretty dense graphs, but there was a question that came up when results were presented in July around looking at the engagement results, doing a demographic analysis of those results. And so I'll just kind of talk about the key takeaways here in this presentation, but I'm also happy to, pull up the report and answer questions about it at a later point. But I think kind of the biggest thing is to that the findings need to be interpreted with caution. There's like a kind of a variety of reasons for that are outlined in the limitations. We have some unequal population sizes when we're doing comparisons. We have, in the case of race and ethnicity, a very small population size. And then we're working with aggregated summary data that's exported from Gallup's tool. So we don't have, for anonymity reasons, right? We don't have raw data to work with and do statistical analysis on to really be able to understand the extent and significance of the differences in the data that we see. But kind of with the, with those limitations in mind, when looking at that comparative data, there were no really big glaring red flags in terms of the differences between groups, which is a positive. There was also, it's, pretty likely that there's a higher percentage of women that are engaged than men when you kind of look at the big picture of engagement. And, there's still unequal population sizes, but women are kind of a larger population. And that combined with the large difference on a lot of the questions makes that pretty likely. It's also likely that newer employees are more engaged than longer tenured employees, which is not really a surprise. I think it'd be concerning if that was not the case. And then the comparative data for race and ethnicity is inconclusive, mostly because of the limitations that I've laid out. As far as next steps in this engagement survey process, Mike kind of talked about, right, like this being a cyclical process. So right now we're in that implementation phase. We have plans in place and it's just, kind of taking action on those. We'll be doing progress check-ins. The HR team will be checking in with supervisors and managers, both informally and formally, to see how things are going. We also have work underway to kind of update the strategy and work plan for inclusion and diversity. And this is data that can inform that. And part of that strategy conversation is also thinking about our data needs related to inclusion and diversity and what additional data we might need. And then we have a survey coming up in June as well. So that'll be kind of the next the next, also, continuation of what's happening now, and then kind of starting this process again. So with that, I can turn it back over to the commission if there are any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Marcia, go ahead.
Kind of in the early PowerPoint with the plans related to the different questions, the development. Can you talk a little bit what development means and what might be an action plan associated with it? And hi, Amy. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Good to see
Yeah.
you at the water utility.
Yes. So this is Amy Deming again. So the question wording on the Gallup survey is, I have opportunities at work to develop and grow. And so the action plans around that, people took that in different directions. So like I said, some of that was looking at job shadowing, some of that was looking at the meetings that teams had, and kind of, optimizing that to kind of share more knowledge. I know there's also a team, the operators who all work different shifts and things like that. I think their question was actually focused on learning and growth and quality work, but they're kind of experimenting with a way to kind of asynchronously share things that they're learning and about, by having kind of a deep dive topic each month and like a whiteboard that they're kind of responding to some questions related to that, and maybe pairing up with someone else to learn more about that topic and then sharing that out. So there's really a variety of things that people are doing. I think there was also another team that was focused on, they have progression plans in place, but just sort of getting more making that information more available to people so that they kind of can understand where they sit and the requirements for that, and what's included in sort of what's taken into account in those progression plans. So there's really a lot of variety that's very specific to each team, but hopefully that gives you kind of a sense of like all the different directions people kind of took that question.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? I don't see any. Okay, well, thank you very much. And are we going to get a small report on the June survey results?
We'll be back next July.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, let's see, that will take us to item 4C, the evaluation of the chief engineer and director, the performance review process. And we've discussed this previously a little bit. We got BJ here, and we had talked about not doing the complete 360 review this year, and maybe doing it every 2 or 3 years. I don't think there's any definitive decision made on that. Because this year, because we've been doing the employee engagement survey, which has given us information, in which we're seeing the reorganization at the top level. So I'm curious to see what anybody's thoughts are. And BJ, if you have any thoughts on what you think is practical at this point.
Yeah, good morning, commissioners. BJ Rogers with Broadlight Consulting. I would concur. I think it is it's both a labor intensive and somewhat duplicative process. It does feel a little bit redundant on an annual basis to do that depth of dive, just given that the process itself can take at least 60 days. That means that actually you're doing this process, kind of starting this process and completing this process with such close proximity to the next process that a full 360 annually is at least a little bit cumbersome. So I think there's some wisdom in the commission's consideration of that. I do also think that the engagement results, as you've just heard an update on, do inform an overall assessment of both executive performance and district success. And so I think there's some validity to seeing that as at least supplemental or additive to an evaluation process. And I think that makes good sense. And I think all of those things said, it is entirely possible to still gather an accurate and comprehensive evaluation of executive performance through the other tools and mechanisms that are included in the process to give the commission sufficient information to make decisions about areas of improvement or opportunity for the chief executive. So that's all I would add at this point. I'm happy to answer questions or engage in discussion.
Ezra, go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. And BJ, thanks for being here today. I think one of our purposes for having this item on the agenda was sort of an after action review of last year's markedly different way of doing the whole CED review. And so I just wanted to speak to that really quick. I think we talked about that. It was a little bit in doing Michael's review for the last year, which of course is in closed session, so that everybody didn't get to hear that. So I mean, I think for having been involved in the really in-depth work that a 360 review entails as a commissioner when we were doing that and didn't have BJ's help, it's this last year I think worked really well. And so I just wanted to sort of get that sort of positive reflection on how did the change and the new approach work. Want to get that out there. I think there's a lot of value. I mean, I've always felt, why I dedicated a significant amount of time to it for a bunch of years, I've always felt there's a lot of value to doing 360 reviews. And that said, I think to do it, in my mind, I'd probably lean towards every other year, sort of a 2-year cycle for that. I think that, that would work just fine. But again, I really do feel there's a lot of value in it. So definitely a fan of the approach, but I think to not necessarily go that deep every year, that's fine. I do want to sort of point out that the last point I'd make is there's the other components of the CED review that aren't 360. I also see as really valuable. And I think just for clarification's sake, we would still do all of that, focus items, monitoring, reporting, et cetera, every year. It's just with the 360 involving both, a wider set of perspectives from within staff and then possibly even sort of folks in the community and owner communities, et cetera, would happen every other year. Just sort of laying all that out. Those are the, when I think about reflect on what we did in the past and what worked, and then think about what would make sense going forward. That's my view of sort of how I think we'd be smart to approach it going forward. Curious to hear what other folks on the commission think.
Okay,
for sure.
Brad, go ahead.
Yep, very briefly, I agree with everything that Ezra just said. I think starting out with making one change to the process and involving the 360 review is a great idea. I think initially we should plan on going to try every 2 years, see how it works, and then make further adjustments as needed. And that's all I had. I like I said, I agree with everything Ezra just said. Thank you.
Okay, Beth.
Yeah, I think so too. I would agree. And I think given all the organizational changes and Michael's new role, I think it would be too early right now to do a 360. I think we need a little bit of time to kind of have things shake out and see, how the organization is working. I'm also excited to see that that the teams are formed and they're setting priorities, and looking forward to hearing more about that as it goes along. So I think a lot of good things are happening, and I'm excited to see it. And I think waiting a year to do a full 360 makes a lot of sense. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Anyone else? So Ezra, am I getting you right that what we'll do this year is we'll do the review of the CED will be limited to the commission and the executive team, basically. And
Right.
and then I think when I'm thinking the executive team, I'm thinking all of the 7 prior reports, since this is looking back to 2023 and the new organization didn't take effect until this year. Does that make sense?
Well, maybe some clarification is needed
Mhm.
because a 360 review included owners, the executive team, and the ELC. And so are you saying that we're still going to do a 360 review for some groups? Is that what you're?
What I'm saying is that the current review would be the commission would give their input for your review and the executive team would give their input. That going out to the ELC, the owner communities, and I can't remember the other one, that would have been the full 360. And so instead of 360, we're doing like a 90 or 180.
Tom,
the way I look at it.
that's different than what I was suggesting. That, for me,
Okay, well, what was it
yeah.
you were suggesting then?
So yeah, for me, the way I define 360 is sort of all of those internal and external checking with folks, which we did in the past, recently BJ did, about the CD's performance. So all of those parts would wait. We wouldn't do that this year. We'd wait till next year. Instead, I think it's much more of the direct focus, more like probably just about any other staff member's performance review, where it's a look at their performance objectives for the year. Michael has the focus items there, and then the evaluation of where things are at on all of those, and all of that informing thinking about what the new focus items look for the year to come. So it's that sort of more directed performance evaluation for the one person, the one staff person in question, but not all of the internal and the external 360 stuff until we come back around to the interval we want to do that stuff.
Okay,
Is that clearer?
I think so. I think basically what you're saying is that it's just the almost the old way we used to do it with Michael. It's the commission going through kind of a step-by-step process of the various points that have been raised before and how those are being acted on and addressed.
Right.
So I don't even know so basically what we'll do is ask Michael to provide his performance report to us, and then we would go through that. I don't even know if BJ needs to be involved in that at this point, based on, because that I'm thinking going almost back to the way we did things, Ezra, way even before, long before
Right.
the ELC and that. Yeah.
Right.
Do I have that right?
I think so. Yeah, that sounds consistent with what I was thinking.
Okay, Beth?
Yeah, I would agree with that, Ezra. I think that doing a performance evaluation of what Michael has accomplished versus the goals that were set for him is exactly what we should do. And I would also like to hear feedback from his direct reports as well. I know this is a little bit early in the process, but I'd like to hear their feedback as well. So just those elements, I think, would be enough for this year to get that to do a performance evaluation.
Okay, that's essentially what I had been suggesting, was the direct reports in the commission earlier, but then Ezra and Brad idea, which I'm not in a disagreement with, was basically just the commission reviewing Michael's take on the performance metrics that he had. So
there is a clarifying question for Beth. Maybe, we have a moving target problem on direct reports to Michael for this review. Whatever review we would choose to do starting any day now is of 2023. Michael's direct reports were, tell me if I'm off on the number, Michael, 6 or 7 in 23. They're going to be 2, or they are 2 now going forward into 24, right? Beth, did you mean 2? Eric?
Yes, I was thinking of the 2 direct reports that he has right now.
Eric and Bill,
keeping
right?
It just at that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Are you in agreement with that, Ezra? And
I'm open
Brad,
to thinking about that. It's you know, again, it is a little bit of a dip into a 360 type review, right? To start to ask reports, you know, for feedback on the evaluation of their supervisor. So it's maybe slightly different than what I had in mind, but I'm open to hearing other folks views on it. I think
okay,
that's
I
sort
saw
of
Greg
we've
had
now
his
clarified
thumb
what's
up,
on the
so-
table in front of us, which is helpful, right? So yeah.
Greg
Yeah.
had his thumb up, so he seemed to be okay with it. Brad, Tom, Ken?
Yeah,
You have
I'm okay with that.
Okay. What about you, Marcia?
I'm a little confused, but I haven't been, I would think
Me
I
too.
came in midway in a review of Michael, so, and I missed one of the, oh, yeah, I think we had two, since I started, two like closed sessions and I missed one, so I'm not really getting, I'm not yet like getting the old way we did things, plus the new way, plus the hybrid going forward. But I understand, I certainly agree that we don't need to do this 360 every year. And I'm willing to listen and hear what people think is the best way to manage the new system plus whatever. So I don't really have a strong contribution to make on the question yet. Thanks.
Okay, and Ken, did you have anything? I saw you had your thumb up, so you're okay with it?
Yeah, I'm okay with it, Tom.
Okay. Tom, you have any viewpoint?
Believe it or not, no. I'm fine with the last suggestion. I think that'll work appropriately. So we can
Okay.
proceed with that.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll have the two current reports to Michael be involved in the process. So Michael, I guess BJ, I mean, you sent something out last year to everybody, so could you just kind of reformat that and send it out? Or maybe Mike Lipsky could do it to the two direct reports to get their feedback, then get that to us. And then Michael will prepare something as he normally does on the metrics that how he's met those. And then the commission will meet to discuss that, and we'll take care of it at that point, huh? Makes sense? So it probably takes 30 days or so, BJ, to get that out and get the responses back, probably less.
Yeah, I think that's pretty easy to do, and I think I can help make that happen. Or it may be that moving forward, now that HR is not a direct report to the CED, it's more appropriate for them to play.
Oh, that's that is a good idea.
role.
Yeah. So Mike, are you okay with doing that aspect?
Yeah, let me talk with BJ about it. I mean, I think
Yeah, why don't you
there's
guys
still a little
talk? And,
squeamishness about it, but
I think we'll authorize whatever you two kind of come up with, that you feel most comfortable. I don't want to put Mike in an uncomfortable position, and then Michael,
Can I weigh in here? I think
Yeah.
part of the richness of the work was BJ's follow-up interviews. And I think it would be more appropriate to have a third party do that, and more confidential. It's going to be difficult being confidential since it's only two people.
Yeah.
But I think we have a higher probability of getting good information and information I can work on if BJ does it. Not
Okay.
saying he wouldn't do a good job, he would, but I'm just.
Okay, so BJ, why don't you do the questionnaire or follow-up interview, the interviews, whatever. And then Michael, you're okay with producing that metric table that you normally do? And so we look to probably hear from you guys in the next month or two. That makes sense? And then we'll meet in closed session to discuss it. Okay, anybody else have anything? I think we got that taken care of. So you guys got enough direction? Yep, okay.
Sounds good.
Good.
Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a minute here. I gotta get back to the agenda. I was on that stuff. Okay,
Thanks,
so
BJ.
now we're at item 4D, approval of the chief engineer and director title change. So there's a resolution in the packet regarding this that would change the chief engineer and director to executive director. Do we have any comments before we get a motion? Or questions, I should say? Okay, don't seeing any. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution changing the title of the chief engineer and director to executive director? Brad?
Yeah,
Your hand up?
I'd be happy to make the motion to approve the resolution.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Murphy. Do we have a second?
Commissioner Freeze, I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Murphy, second by Commissioner Freeze to approve the resolution authorizing the change in the title of the chief engineer and director to executive director. Any further comments or discussion? Brad?
Yeah, before we just go ahead and approve it, I think I just wanted to say that I think that the change in the title makes a lot of sense, and the more that I've thought about it over the last month or so, I feel like it's absolutely the right decision to make. I also wanted to indicate that the organizational changes that have been made, I think, are in the best interest of the district in the long run. And I think it helps both changing the title as well as the organizational changes help to really clarify the role of the executive director and his direct reports. And I think overall it's in the best interest of the district to make this title change.
Okay, I see a few thumbs up to that Brad's comment. I would concur with that. I would also want to say that Michael is still an engineer. So even though he's not the chief engineer and director of the district, he's still an engineer. And I think that's important to understand that he's still educated in the workings of the engineering field. And he's not leaving in that regard, and that it's just that the way the district has evolved in terms of the necessary means for leadership and so forth, his focus is changing and perhaps more appropriately giving more authority to those below. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so we had a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? None, motion carries. Okay, so that will take us to a change in the resolution. Instead of the ECED update, it's the executive director update. Michael?
I don't have any events to report this week, commissioners.
So okay.
President Hubble, with apologies to Vanessa, Paul, Alan, whoever else is yet to come on the agenda. I have to go now for a 9:30 work meeting. Great meeting, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye, Ezra.
Take care.
Bye. Okay, I'm sorry, my thing froze up again. I'm only 5 feet from the thing, so I don't know what's happening.
President Hubble, you may not have heard me when you broke up, but I don't have anything to report this morning.
Yeah, I just heard that, then I had broken up, and so I didn't get a follow-up. So we'll go on to the operations report. Alan?
There we go. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
And you can see the report. Good. Alan Grooms, operations manager for the district. I'll be presenting the December operations report. So this will, as we get into the subsequent slides, it'll have components that are dealing with kind of year-end summaries. So for performance for effluent treatment plant performance, you know, maybe arguably the most important measure for our performance. Numbers look good, well below permit values. CBD 5 was touch above historical numbers, but those numbers are fairly low. We're starting to get about 3 years worth of data since we've changed to a CBOD number. Those that have been in the commission longer maybe have dug back into past reports. We used to do a BOD 5 or effluent under a previous permit, and that elevated those numbers because in a way it kind of double counted ammonia. So this is maybe more reflective of actual performance. Our ammonia values, to speak of that, 0.18, very good for December, well below permit. Suspended solids, 5.3, right in the normal range. Chloride numbers are down in the normal historical range, well below the historical values, and with a relatively dry December, probably, I'd have to verify that, but that looks like a low number for wintertime values. So, some of that obviously is base load from softeners and things, but other components that chloride come in and really push us on the limits there when we start getting into road salt, things like that. So we caught a break with a relatively warm and not a lot of need for de-icers in December. So, and our phosphorus numbers also look good. Any questions on the general performance metrics from the commission? Okay, I'm going to move on here to looking at our overall summation that we do periodically. By how these are scaled, it makes it look like we had a real marked increase in clean water, which is the water we've treated and discharged, returned back to the environment. 3.81 billion gallons for the year. But when you start looking at those numbers, we're about 0.3 billion gallons more than the 22, 21. It's really just a function. We've had a relatively dry stretch here the past few years. Don't know whether that's something that we're going to be seeing further with, as we talk about long-term climate change and things like that, whether that's something we will long-term see those as drier trends, or whether we'll see a return to the mean. From treatment plant operation standpoint, all we can do is deal with what comes at us and try and be prepared for what might come. So these numbers are relatively low, but it was slightly higher than previous 2 years. Biogas production was right in line with what we've been seeing the last couple of years. Again, very similar. And then our reused effluent, that's what we call our W4. That's basically chlorinated effluent that we reuse for things that don't require drinking water within the plant. Kind of mid-range, kind of an average value again for what we would see for the past few years. So any questions on these metrics? Okay, then I'll keep going. Biosolid storage as of the end of the year, the tanks were 25% full. That is a pretty reasonable number for this time of year. We're projecting that we've got storage good until late May, early June, which, as I've mentioned before, if we get to that point and we aren't hauling out, there's probably bigger problems and probably regional problems. Probably you'll see our flows come up if that's what we're dealing with. So, but we're feeling like we're in pretty good shape for the storage on the biosolids. Metrico cake, it's pretty much the same value we've had. That's our Class A cake product. Struvite production, we did see an uptick overall for years production based on some focused efforts there to try and look at. We've got this equipment we've had, this process a little older, we've gotten more experience with it, but it's also, as it's aged, it's maybe gotten a little less efficient. So we did make a focused effort in my team in 2023 to see some things that we could maybe tweak and be a little more efficient with that. And I think these numbers bear out that we had some success with that. And then our Metrico product, this is our product that's not actually what's sent to the fields, what we actually sent to those storage tanks. So when I talk about the storage tanks being full, this is the part that's doing the filling. And you can see those numbers. Again, the graphs maybe make them look a little bit more differentiation than there are, but for all intents and purposes, we're really talking pretty constant values as far as volume for the past 3 years. So any questions on these metrics? Okay, and then we obviously had a pretty cold stretch. I know sometimes people ask about the effect of the cold. We did, the operators do have to go out in that. We do see when it gets very cold, we do see clarifier, the scum beaches and things like that. They do ice up. So a lot of operators having to be out in that cold. Try and minimize how much salt we do on that, but we do have to salt those sometimes or chip them in order to keep those from freezing up and stopping our clarifiers, which it's a fairly simple piece of equipment, but a buildup of ice can stop that pretty readily. So we had a lot of dedicated staff that got out in that cold, not just the operators doing that, but also, facilities maintenance and other crews out in the clearing quite a bit of snow. So, and we'll get into that in a future meeting. So any general questions for me? Otherwise, I have nothing else to report, Commissioner Hovell.
Okay, any questions for Alan? I don't see any. Okay, thank you very much, Alan.
Thank you, Commissioners.
That will move on to the regulatory and legal. Vanessa?
Good morning, Commissioners. Paul's going to do the legal services update, but before he does that, I wanted to provide just a quick update on the regulatory review that I provided to the Commission at the last meeting. There's been some developments on the legislative front. So the PFAS bill, SB 312, AB 312, it's awaiting further action in the Assembly. We've heard that there may be an amendment offered to that bill and that might then proceed in the Assembly. So we will keep you posted on action on that bill. And then Senate Bill 99, Assembly Bill 100, that's the bill that would make projects for reduction of I&I in connecting laterals eligible for funding under the Clean Water Fund. That bill is also awaiting further action in the Assembly, and we've heard that an amendment will also be offered to that bill that wouldn't affect the substance of that bill and the availability of Clean Water Fund for those types of I&I projects. We think that may be offered, that amendment may be offered relatively soon, and then the bill scheduled in the Assembly. So we're hopeful that that one will advance here soon. And I will obviously keep providing you updates at the next meeting with the regulatory review. I'm happy to answer any questions on that before Paul provides the legal services update.
Okay, any questions on the regulatory side for Vanessa? Don't see any hands, so Paul, why don't you go ahead with the legal review?
Thank you.
December was a busy month as well, and we had a number of regulatory issues. There were some questions about the district's enforcement policy. We had to coordinate the Buy America, Build America provisions. There were some issues about some regulatory interpretation of that, and we coordinated with NACWA on those comments. PFAS continued to be an issue that Vanessa and I monitored closely with Marty. And, you know, we were starting to get ready for the district's permit application, and so there were some questions about some of the timing and some TMDL issues and a few things as we're starting to gear up for that. And on a separate issue, there was a question about our ability to accept leachate from basically Dane County and a commitment letter to the county and how we would proceed with that. There were also a number of contract issues with some ongoing issues with maintaining district property for future uses. We continue to work with Badfish Creek canoe launch easement, and there were some contractual issues with one of the consultants the district is working on, and so kind of working through professional services issues with them. And then there was also a copyright issue. So every so often, some of those things come up, and we had a chance to respond to that. So those were the primary areas, in addition to kind of monitoring as what was going on at the legislature. So that's all I have. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, Greg's got a question.
Out of pure curiosity, Paul, I am just wondering what the copyright issue would be for a public entity.
I'd have to go back and take a look. We coordinated with Amanda on you know, how certain materials were acquired and could be used. So I can get back to you on that and the details. It's just not at the forefront of my memory this minute.
Yeah, I could also just jump in and give a very brief backstory. We wanted to highlight a lab tool that a former employee created and had a patent for, but then sold to a for-profit company. And we wanted to highlight that as part of our history. But there's a question of who owned the copyright to it, having sold it. We had a book about it internally. So we just wanted to make sure we dotted our I's and crossed our T's on that, Commissioner Freese. Thank you, though.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember that that was the auto easy thing for biological oxygen demand, if I remember right. Yeah. Okay. That will take us to future meeting schedule. That's in the packet. So I don't think we have any in-person meetings until, what was it, Michael? April
11th.
April 11th. So we'll be here for a couple months on Zoom, unless
I
something
do-
changes.
I do want to say that a couple of us will be attending the National Association of Clean Water Agency NACWA conference on February 15th. So Bill will be running the meeting on my behalf, and Amanda and Marty will be joining me at the conference. So just so you know.
Okay. So Bill will be in charge in next meeting. Okay, any future agenda topics or other business? Seeing none, Tom?
I have a motion to adjourn in my pocket.
Motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by
second that, Tom, Commissioner Clark.
Commissioner Clark to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? None? Motion carries. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good remainder of your week.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
See ya. See ya February.
Bye.